Well, hello and welcome to the Profit Express. I'm Tim Healy, and I'm inviting you to join me each and every Wednesday so you could be ready to win the battle for business. That's right. That's what we do here. So thanks for being on board, sharing some of your time with me today. Hey, and as always, a big thank you to our good friends and sponsors at Corbett Public Relations, where they've been promoting and protecting businesses and brands for over 30 years. So do yourself a favor. Visit Bill and his team at CorbettPR.com. That's CORBETT-PR.com. Welcome aboard, everybody. Now, it is rare in life that the pursuit of a dream takes a direct path from point A to point B. It just doesn't happen that way. There's tons of left turns and right turns and all sorts of hurdles and detours that most of which are unforeseen. And that's exactly what happened to today's guest. You see, he had a childhood dream of becoming a filmmaker. But with life and everything that goes on, he didn't really pursue it because he thought it was an impossible dream. So instead, he pursued a career in sales. And that's where I first met today's guest in 2013. So it's over a decade ago. And the story began when I was doing a sales training for a client, and today's guest, his name, Mike Kilcoyne. He was one of the newbie rookie sales guys that I was training. And safe to say, when it came to sales, at this point, Mike didn't know shit from beans. And unfortunately, that first job didn't end up so well because he ended up getting fired. But what he lacked in initial sales skills, he had an abundance of passion and persistence. So on to his next sales job. And he kept at it, kept grinding. And soon enough, he got to the top of the leaderboard. So things are looking good. But again, life takes us down some interesting paths. And Mike became reflective, and he dealt with the death of a number of family members and even, unfortunately, a close childhood friend. And he's reflecting on life and realizing how fragile and how short and brief life really can be. And then he realized, man, there's so much to life I don't know. You know, how to life when it comes to finance and money and careers and relationships. So at that moment, Mike decides, you know what, I'm going to get my first camera. And I'm going to start to document myself and my life. So then shortly thereafter, he pushes his stack of chips into the table and dumps all of his money, all of his life savings into equipment and starts Mike Kilcoyne Productions. And I've had a very unique and interesting insight and view into Mike's journey these past 10 years because we've had a great relationship. We've stayed friends. We've stayed connected over these years. And I really enjoyed the journey that he's taken and the ups and downs that he shared with me and that he shared with social media, quite frankly. And it's been inspiring. And listen, when you're chasing any dream in life, the path is usually not pretty, and it is full with all sorts of, like I said, right turns, left turns, and detours. And that's what Mike has endured. And he has a special project that he shared with me not too long ago that I invited him on. I want to, kind of get an update what's going on. And whether, whatever dream it is you're pursuing, Mike Kilcoyne's story is the kind of story that I believe people need to hear. Because a lot of people can relate to Mike. Even if you have nothing to do with filmmaking, that doesn't matter. But if you're in the pursuit of that dream that you thought is impossible, just the way Mike was thinking, over a decade ago, well, you know what? Mike's going to let you know it's not impossible. So I've really been looking forward to the show, having back an old friend, Mike Kilcoyne Productions. How are you today, Mike?
Great, Tim. Thank you for thanks for having me on the show. This is so exciting. As you were leading into the intro, I got more and more nervous for whatever reason. I was fine, and then but this is exciting. Thanks for having me.
Well, listen, I'm sorry. I had to be genuine and legit when you first started in sales. As I said, you didn't know shit from beans, but I give you a lot of credit, man. You were tenacious. You were absolutely tenacious. That was one of the first things I greatly respected and admired from you. But you learned quickly. You learned quickly, and certainly sales is one of your skill sets today. But we're not here to talk about sales. We're here to talk about the journey of your dream of becoming a filmmaker. And you had this trailer that you shared with me. The trailer is called How to Life. Mm-hmm. And very early on that trailer, it said you spent most of your adult life running from challenges or responsibilities. That was a very interesting opening to that trailer. So when Mike Kilcoyne talks about running from responsibilities, what does that mean for you?
Well, I think it's something that this isn't universally true, but mm-hmm. I think it's a byproduct in part of a life of privilege, in that you have the option to pull the ripcord.
Right.
And so I think I would often take that, because I was like, well, I've, 50 grand in the bank, or I have or whatever. I have some kind of plan B that's better than this, so I can avoid really figuring this out. And so I did that with pretty much everything, between, sales is really, now that I think about it, it's like the only thing that I think has been the consistent thread through everything right. I've done.
Right.
Sales and filmmaking, those, everything else has just kind of been like, well, that's not fun anymore, so I'm just gonna,
because you mentioned you said running away from things, and you mentioned, hey, you had a life of privilege. So that life of privilege, gave you that safety net to I can bail. Things are getting tough. Things are getting hot.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's, and it wasn't like, I grew up upper middle class, and
right.
then and then my grandparents died, and my grandfather had done pretty well, and so it wasn't like I always grew up under this situation. But when your circumstances change, I think there's not like a course, people don't, they're not, hey, this is going to happen, and so here, it's not like when you get your license, you have to take a thing. It just happens, and then you kind of have to figure it out. And so, that's sort of what happened. I can't remember what the question was.
It's just, listen, you had the safety net. You had what sounded like an inheritance.
Yeah.
And, because of that, you didn't have because certain entrepreneurs have to face the fact of, failure is not an option, which actually is a great asset. But you didn't have that because you had that safety net.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, I could fall on my ass here and there, and
the landing was soft. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, but
so you have this trailer. Okay. It's How to Life. And, when you and I were talking, we've been kind of going back and forth recently, and, you were faced with some adversity, family members who died, childhood friend who died, you question life. And in the trailer, by the way, I thought it was an awesome trailer. I thought you did a fantastic job.
Thank you.
So it starts with you running away, again, part of the theme. And then just tell us the story. The story takes us from Japan to Istanbul. You're all over the place. What the hell happened to you, and how did you find yourself on the opposite end of the world?
Yeah. Well, it's a strange thing, but I remember since I was like 13, I'd always wanted to live in Japan, and I genuinely wanted to learn Japanese and so on. And I think it was like in 2019 I visited I visited Japan for a couple weeks for the first time with a few friends. And and I just fell in love, and I was like, wow, this is awesome. I would love to live here. Um, y- y- and so I remember like one day I came back from like a trip.
Mm-hmm.
I was visiting I was still living in Denver at the time, and I was visiting my parents in Phoenix, and I flew into to Denver. And I just remember like looking around the city and being like, I don't really think that there's anything else for me to like do here or to see here. Like I feel like I had done all of the
Mm.
things, which isn't true necessarily, but that was just the feeling I had. And I was like, you know what? I think it's time to move to. Yeah, I think it's time to really chase that initial inclination of moving to a foreign country and move to Japan. So I sold all my stuff and I moved there like basically right before COVID started. Like so COVID was kind of already happening, and then I basically got locked into Japan for like 6 months.
So how long are you in Japan?
So I was living in Kyoto for 6 months. Yeah, and then I moved to Istanbul.
Why Istanbul? That seems like an interesting
Um,
choice.
yeah. So I visited Istanbul like in 2014,
Right.
and I loved it. I thought it was like, I mean, it's such a cool, interesting city, incredible food.
Right.
And when I was in Kyoto, this was towards the end of so they had extended my visa to like 6 months. Normally it's 3. And so towards the end of that, I was like, well, I have to either go back to the US, which I didn't really want to do, or figure out where I want to go next. And the only other country that was really open was Turkey. And this was like in the middle of 2020. So um, I I just remember I was in like a hookah cafe in Kyoto, run by a couple of guys who are from Turkey, or who were from Istanbul originally.
Hmm.
And I was just talking to them. I was like, could I get into Turkey right now? And they were like, yes, you can go, and it is amazing. And it's the Turkish impression. It's not good, but and uh, so I talked to my buddy Rick, and I was like, dude, would you want to go to Istanbul? And he's like, sure. And so we both like bought flights and basically moved there. And I remember like the flight board, so I was flying out of God, I forgot the name of the airport. Not I think Haneda. And the flight board's like every flight but my flight was canceled.
Are
And
you
so
serious?
there's just one flight. Yeah. Well, because it was during COVID, so like everything was just getting shot, and it like really felt like the scene out of a movie. It was such a trip. And then I got there, and it was amazing. So
So all right. So this is funny. I mean, I I hear you taking these adventures, and
Mhm.
it's my personality. I can't even envision myself, and I hate to sound like I'm closed minded, but you know, and again, I have a family, I have a son, maybe it's a little different.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
let me go to Japan, let me go to Istanbul. So you have these life experiences. You're pursuing filmmaking. So How to Life is the title of the trailer. Give me, what your objective is in How to Life in this trailer, because it's for a docuseries. Ultimately, you want to be docuseries on a streaming platform, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
take us through that.
So
Why are you creating it, and what's your message? What's your objective here?
yeah. Well, I think the biggest motivating force for almost everything I do is here's a fear that I have, and so in the case of How to Life, it's a lot of things. It's a fear of commitment. It's fear of what if I just continue to suck at money and squandering resources or otherwise, or like what if I can't ever figure out how to effectively sell myself, like there are all these different fears that I think we all have as humans.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's really about identifying what are those fears and how
Right.
do I create the systems and develop the tools and resources to tackle and navigate that. And just show people that it's possible. Like it's possible to take something that because I've experienced it so many times and so many different things I've done. Like even moving to Japan was utterly terrifying for me because I didn't know anybody. I didn't know the language. Uh, 15 hours time difference from the East Coast, blah, 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 or something, 13 hours. Um, so that's really the motivation for me is like, at the very least, I'm going to be tackling and navigating these once petrifying parts of my life
Mm-hmm.
and I'm learning something from it. And if I can teach other people or at least show other people like, hey, look, this is a thing that I was dealing with and this is how I navigated it, then that's cool too. So
So, all right, this is the part. Now, again, we've known each other for over a decade. And like I said, it started,
yeah,
when you were a rookie salesman at one of my clients, right?
yeah.
And so, we've obviously kept in touch over the years. I followed you on social. I followed, your blog writings and all that. And one thing, I don't know if it's getting off topic, but maybe I think maybe it's directly speaking to why you're doing this. So obviously I'm older than you, right? There's probably about a 20-year
No,
spread in us.
no.
Yeah, you're very kind. So, when I started my own business, I was just a grinder and, we all have our own mentors. So I started the business in 2000, early 2000s, and there was always this thought of, you've probably heard, the phrase, fake it till you make it. And everything's
Mm,
great and blah, 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 blah. But there's a lot of bullshit associated with that. And listen, in the beginning,
yeah.
I certainly struggled. I fell on my ass a lot of times. And in following you and how, and I don't use this word lightly, how courageous you were to share, because you shared some pretty deep things over the years of challenges that you've
Mm.
gone through,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
relationships, careers, money, all of that. And I,
Uh-huh.
knowing you, considering you a friend, reading that, I thought to myself, I'm like, holy shit, I can't believe Mike is sharing this. And I just thought that
Mhm.
because how I was brought up, my, I guess, generation, like, oh, you can't share that. But as I do this show and I talk to people like you of the younger generation and how they've embraced authenticity, I think it could be so powerful. Now you're putting this docuseries together where essentially it's Mike Kilcoyne's putting himself on the line, and we're following the life and
Yeah.
times of Mike Kilcoyne through all these, life experiences, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think to your point,
I admire
it's
the hell out of
becoming
that.
increasingly. Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's becoming increasingly more common,
Yeah.
certainly among the younger generations. And there's something about, and Brene Brown. I don't know if you've read any of her stuff, but she talks about this a lot. How like
Hmm.
the way to remove shame associated with something, whether it be an insecurity or flaw or
Mm.
whatever,
Right.
is by talking about it. And so for me, that's sort of like, I'm like, well, I feel bad about this thing. So what's the quickest path towards feeling less bad about that? Okay, well, what if I just start talking about it? Like I mean, yeah, I think about this like even in the fact that, and I talk about this now quite openly, but like, I essentially invested, a couple hundred grand into these different film projects and they haven't returned yet. And now I'm like pretty broke and I need to like figure and need to, and have basically been scrambling to drive sales and to figure out a more effective business model, and and to earn money. But for
Sure.
a while I was just like, shit, what do I do? I
Right.
just
Right.
put all this money into this thing. It's not going to see a return immediately, maybe not for the next few years, maybe not ever. So what do I do? And there was a lot of shame with that because like when you invest and basically go through that sort of money, you're
Right.
just kind of like, god, what am I clearly I'm not like good at this, I'm not, so there's a lot of stuff that comes with it. But so for me it's really just like, oh, if I talk about this stuff I feel better about it, there's less shame, and then I'm able to just like move on with my life, so
Yeah. I mean, that for me is even at this point is hard to embrace. Although it's become certainly more popular and more accepted. Um,
sure.
and again, I just again I didn't mean to laugh at the fact that you've dumped hundreds of thousands and haven't gotten the return yet,
Well,
because
it's
here,
kind of funny.
yeah, well, it's funny because it's not my money, but here on the
Sure,
Profit
yeah.
Express, we don't laugh at not making a return on your money, but
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
it's
very
kind
counter to the,
of right, right,
yeah,
right, 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 right. And it's about winning the battle for business, but you know, so you've you sent me the trailer like maybe a month ago. My first reaction out of seeing it, I thought it was entertaining. I thought the message was really good. So listen, this is something that's going to get traction. I just I know you, and I know the passion you have for it. I know you'll figure it out. Easier said than done, but hey, it's your journey.
sure.
So take us through, because I guess this is an interesting question for me because I don't know filmmaking at all, right?
Yeah.
So you're sharing these life experiences, but how are you going to structure the docuseries? I find that would be very interesting to talk about.
Mm. Yeah. Well, the initial plan is essentially, I'm breaking it up into like different themes. So each episode is has a different theme, like thematically. So, like one episode, like the first episode that I've cut together, is centered around money
Hmm.
and my own challenges and hangups and so on around money. And then I talked to, I interview Dave and Carrie Kirpin, who are, I mean, you've known them for a while.
Sure.
Just brilliant entrepreneurs. They sold a company a couple years ago for, like seven figures or more, uh, eight figures, something like that.
Hey, you actually had Dave on
And
after they sold. Yeah,
oh, it's amazing. Yeah.
yeah. It's a
So,
great story.
yeah, so like I was talking with them about sort of their own experiences and challenges with, money and surrounding money and, their own fears, and that was really, really powerful. And then the next episode is about my own relationship with like being a Jew, and and just like how sort of complicated that's been, and how I have tattoos, which is kind of like poo poo, like in that world, and um, although there's a lot of misnomers about that stuff too, but and so each episode essentially focuses on a particular like fear or hang up of mine, and my trajectory in sort of navigating that. And
Hmm.
again,
Hmm.
it's because it's not happening over the course of years. It's there's it's the beginning of the journey. Like my logic is like throughout the series, I'll continue to have you know check-ins and like circle back on these different areas, and really just how I tell stories is like, hey, here's an experience I had, and it was difficult and challenging or otherwise, and here's what I learned. And and I think those really really personal ways of storytelling are the I, I think the best way to get people to connect with something. Like the more personal you can make it, weirdly enough, like the more it relates to a larger group. So
Well, yeah. 'Cause listen, who amongst us hasn't had challenges in finance? Decisions we've made, investments we've made, et cetera. But let me go back to one of the first episodes you did. And you had Dave and Carrie Kerpen on, the serial entrepreneurs. I've had them both on the show over the years. Both New York Times bestselling authors, really super accomplished people. So then this is interesting. When you had them on, what was Mike Kilcoyne's takeaway and lesson from Dave and Carrie?
I think it was that fear never really goes away. Like they're both. Um, I mean, I think Dave doesn't have that as much, or he is more the type of personality who leans into excitement and abundance,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
whereas Carrie in that first episode talks a lot about her own fears, even though they're both insanely accomplished. Like
Right. Yeah,
they
yeah.
probably won't ever have to worry um, about money ever, and still they do. And I think that to me was weirdly reassuring, that oh, this doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. There's
Right.
not like a secret, like you figure out a secret formula and then all of a sudden you're good for the rest of your life. It's just a thing that you have to learn to manage and to really wrestle with. So that
So no,
was
listen,
helpful.
that's an interesting perspective, because obviously they're successful. So you think, oh, they sold their business for some big dollars. You think, okay, they're good, they're comfortable, they're not worrying, but yet fear still creeps in. It's just at a different level, but it's
Yeah.
still there. It's still there. Wow. Now, all right. So this is interesting. Now, out of the different episodes, you talked about relationships. The hearts you've broken, the ones who've broken your heart, like so many of us.
Mhm.
Um, well, I mean, there's so many ways I want to go. Right. So let me ask you this: out of the episodes you've done so far, which has been the most challenging personally for you to produce?
Mm. I think weirdly enough, the money one, because I think I had always prided myself on being pretty fiscally responsible
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and good in that. I was able to invest wisely and, and I didn't really, it's not like I went out and bought like a Porsche or, a boatload of cocaine or whatever. Like I've been pretty fiscally, like living in Turkey and Japan was less expensive than living in the US, for
Okay.
example. Um, so, I had always prided myself on that. And
Mm-hmm.
yet, I guess my addiction has sort of become filmmaking and, and effectively investing in myself.
Right.
And a lot of that stuff doesn't really, I mean, sometimes it won't ever see a return.
Right.
And
Right.
so I think just being really, really open about that and being like, look, this is where I'm at, like I had all these resources, I invested them, and it hasn't really turned into anything right
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
just yet. It just
Right.
feels really bad. It just feels really bad to talk about. Now I feel much better about it, but like when I first started sharing and talking about that, I was like, well, I guess I'm not good at this, because you also, it, I, I think the challenge I have with a lot of depictions of the entrepreneurial sort of arc in media is that often it's like, oh yeah, it's like a straight trajectory. It's like, did it, I quit my job at 33 at a company that I was unhappy with, and within the first 2 or 3 years, everything was honky dory, and that's bullshit too. It's not an accurate.
Right.
It's just not an accurate depiction, I don't think. So when you are so like inundated with that message, and then all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden you're like, well, that wasn't my experience, in fact it kind of sucked and the opposite happened, you kind of feel like you certainly feel like a failure, but you also feel like, oh, there's something wrong with me because I couldn't figure this out.
So that
So
was the episode on money, on finances. That was a tough pill to swallow.
yeah, yeah, because I also just hate talking really openly about that stuff, you know
So all
or
right.
hated
So
it, I should say. Yeah.
you are so certainly uncomfortable, and hey, I'm bringing it up again here on the Profit Express to make you feel even better about yourself, Mike. But hey, that's what
Great.
friends
Yeah,
are
yeah, yeah.
for, you know.
Exactly. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Let me now again. I saw the trailer. I was really impressed. Just from the production, how it was put together, the message. And one of the things that you spoke about that again, why I'm having you on is I would describe Mike Kilcoyne in a number of ways, but one of the ways I really would describe him is courageous. And as much as I'm 20 years your senior, there's a lot I can learn from you, and it's not easy for me. The transparency of it. And I hold myself back. I hold myself back in either business
Mm.
or social media or even as the host of the show. But one of the things that you talked about was when you're talking about your journey and, being a white privileged guy in his, early mid 30s, and you're going through life when it was really challenging for you and not feeling comfortable being by yourself, so kind of going home to live with your parents.
Yeah.
What was that part of the journey about?
Oh man. Well, so I won't go into the details too much, but essentially, we uh, were investing a lot of money into a production, which we did end up filming ultimately, but a TV pilot called Bitten Inc. And a couple of things were happening
Mm-hmm.
that essentially forced us to push the production back. And there were a lot of people that you know uh, were expecting a paycheck from this, or expecting like there were a lot of
Yeah.
people that were sort of
Yeah.
like relying on me to fulfill my side of things so that they could do this thing and we could, and that, and then I like leading up to the production because of just a few things that were happening with the team. Like I stopped sleeping, like I
Oh
just like
man.
wasn't able to really sleep at night.
Right.
I wasn't like consciously like, well, I'm gonna stop sleeping, but I just could not get to sleep. I, started dealing with just a soul crushing amount of like anxiety and depression and, and then it started to really like
Yeah.
unravel and turn into
Yeah.
thoughts, like just really dark thoughts. And I was like, this is not good. This is not good. And also I was living in LA and like when that stuff starts happening, it's like the worst place to be, I think. So, you know, uh, basically I just went into this like downward spiral and in and I was like, I can either, continue to just go into this spiral and, like, I don't know, like kill myself, or I can, go into a safe space and not do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I chose to, so I just chose to do
Well, listen,
that. Yeah.
again, I bring it up. It was on the trailer. You shared it,
Yeah.
obviously. I would never take it lightly. Nobody would, take that lightly. I think we've all been in those places. Certainly a
Yeah.
lot of us, whether it's depression, anxiety. But now it's like bringing the theme of, again, the title of the trailer and the docuseries, How to Life.
Hmm.
I think it's again that theme of just talking about things and talking about the
Yeah.
uncomfortable finances with Dave and Carrie Kirpin, and then talking about what you just shared. Because it's when we don't talk about that, we try to bury it or ignore it or it doesn't exist, that usually kicks our ass.
Yeah. 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 I found it's often 10 times worse when you're not sharing or talking about it.
Yeah.
Whereas as soon as you start opening up about it, then, then you also find that people are like, oh, that's crazy, because that's the thing I was dealing with over did it, and you're able to find that external support
Mm.
from the
Mm-hmm.
community, which I think we all need, because we're humans and we're community driven animals, and
Absolutely.
so
Yeah. Let me ask you
yeah.
this then. So in the production so far with filmmaking, again, that's a
Mhm.
world I really don't know. What do you enjoy most about the process?
Mm. I think I've struggled with this and that. I often sort of like, because it's the most time consuming and painful part of the process, I'll often like push it off till like the very, very last minute. But editing for me is really where the magic happens, because you can film, and I've done this, like you film the most beautiful thing, but if it's not edited well and carefully and otherwise, it doesn't really matter. It's like you go to a restaurant, they have the most amazing ingredients, but like the chef sucks, then it's
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just not
yeah,
going to
yeah.
work.
Right.
So that part for me is so important, and I think I've really started to embrace it as just a painful, yes, part of the filmmaking process, but easily the most important piece, because you know you can make something that like is shot on like an iPhone or a GoPro or whatever that like kind of looks like crap, or otherwise you can make it good and interesting if it's just well edited.
Right.
So I love that. And I think I've really started to embrace just the joy of that part of the process.
So it's, I think you've used, and you and I have talked about it over the years, and I think it's actually a Marine term, is like embracing the suck. And, You know,
Yeah,
as challenging as editing is, but it's so crucial to the finished product. And you know, while it's challenging, you procrastinate it. It's become something that you enjoy doing the most.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that's also true. And I've started to basically have to lean into this side of things of,
Right.
I'm basically getting back into business development and sales and actually,
Hmm.
drumming up client work, because I basically had that part of me was dormant for a long, long time. But I'm starting to realize like the thing that I'm most afraid of, which is often just like picking up the phone to call somebody, is
Right.
far and away the most effective way to get in front of somebody.
Oh, you know that.
Um, yeah, yeah, and I think I'm also realizing like, oh, I kind of enjoy this. Like, this isn't that bad. Like, the fear that I feel dissipates when somebody picks up, and I'm like, hey, what's up, Joe? It's Mike, Tyler, something or whatever. So, um, yeah, and I think that's just a norm, like an innate part of the human condition, which is we we build stuff up in our heads
Mm.
infinitely more than, in terms of like how scary it is
Oh
than
yeah,
the reality.
dude. Mike. I could
And
not
but
agree more. I
it's
mean,
so strange, yeah.
how we get so wrapped up.
Hmm.
It happens to all of us, and it's like there's actually an acronym that you just made me think about, and it was actually tied to a book. I forget the author's name, and it was the acronym for fear, and it's fantasized experiences appearing real.
Mm,
And how work
that's good.
that's an awesome point, man. I'm glad you brought that up. Let me jump back to the docuseries. Do you have,
Sure.
I don't know if you want to share it or not, but is there an idea for the next episode or the next story that you're doing or
Yeah.
working on, or what can you tease us with?
Yeah, yeah, and it's sort of like, I'm releasing it very like incrementally. Like, you can see a lot of it if you just go to howtolifeshow.com. You can see like roughs of the first two episodes plus, random clips and so on that I've cut together. Um, but another episode I'm working on, and I've already done an interview for it, and a couple other clips is around like building a community.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I'm new to like my community, and I don't, for as long as I've lived there, I haven't really had a good circle of friends, and so for me, that episode is like figuring out like how do you navigate these, relationships and build connections with
Mm.
uh, with people who have very busy lives. And then another episode, the other episode I'm working on is just being an artist and sort of like that struggle and turmoil of creating. And I think and I've certainly struggled with a lot of artists sort of like wait for inspiration. They're like, well, I'll just kind of hang out and be inspired and whatever. But you really need to, I think the most um, successful artists just view it like any other job or
Mm.
occupation, which is like you go into your office, whatever that looks like. You sit in front of the canvas or the computer or the typewriter, and you just do your freaking job. And it's not sexy, not,
Yeah.
is it occasionally sexy? Sure, but for the most part, it's like
Right.
pretty mundane.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And it's just like, just shut up and do your job.
Right. Well,
So
like you say in sales, like,
that's
listen, your job is to sell something. or your job. It's time to make a damn movie. Let's do it. Waiting for inspiration.
Yeah.
It's going to be a lonely experience.
Yeah.
So let me do. And this has been a great conversation. It's just personally just connecting again with you and following your journey,
great.
man.
Thank you.
It's been a blast, and again, I really commend your courage and just sharing what you share. And it's had a positive impact on me, and I know for a fact that a message like yours, when it's shared, it's guaranteed to connect with and positively impact people who need to hear the message. And that's a great thing about, when you have shows like yours and sharing what you're sharing. So here's my last question for you. If you had an ultimate goal for the series to accomplish, like let's say 10 years after you do the last episode, what would you want to be known to have accomplished?
Wow. That's a tough question.
It's the Profit Express. We don't joke around here, man. Come on.
Yeah. Jeez, holy smokes. Well, so my ultimate goal as a filmmaker beyond how to life is there's one figure in my life who I often and almost always look to, especially in very, very challenging times. And that's my great uncle, Jacob. And he was a Holocaust survivor. He, basically lost his entire family. But ultimately was able to, first of all, he fought alongside the Jewish partisans, which were essentially a resistance force during World War II.
Yep.
And there's a Daniel Craig movie called Defiance that kind of follows that. But, and then he was able to escape to Israel, then fought in the War of Independence because he was like, well, let's keep this going. No, but I mean, he was just
right.
Yeah. I mean, I think he just was somebody who would do whatever it takes to reestablish and rebuild a life that was taken from him. And he did. And so my dream as a filmmaker is for this to sort of be a stepping stone in eventually being able to tell his story. Because it's, I mean, you have those figures in your life who have just this outsized impact. How you view the world and just and sort of you're like, well, if he could live through that, what the hell am I complaining about? And that he's always sort of been that person and that fuel for me. So being able to tell his story in a compelling way and on big screens is, for me, is sort of the ultimate dream. So if this series can convince enough people that I can faithfully do that and and use their resources well, then that's a huge win for me. So that's I think a big part of the motivation for me.
And that's
a great question.
Well, it was a great answer. It was your great uncle Jacob.
Yes. Yep.
He sounds like a badass hero, man. I'll say you that much.
Yeah, I mean he had told me stories about how he went undercover as a Nazi officer, because he looked German enough, and he spoke fluent German, but he would tell me stories about how he went undercover to rescue his brother from Nazi imprisonment, and was successful in doing that.
Talk about embracing
You
the
know,
suck.
just also. Oh yeah, yeah,
Jesus.
yeah.
And I don't say that lightly.
Yeah.
Man, we could keep going here, Kilcoyne. Man,
Sure,
it's
yeah.
I'm glad to spread the message any way I can. And
Thank
again,
you. Yeah.
how can people give that web link again for people to connect with you?
Yeah,
and,
it's
and
if you
How
go to
to Life?
howtolifeshow.com, that'll
Awesome.
get you to the initial page, and you know, and that has like the first two sort of like rough episodes, and you know, as I continue to release them, it'll be there. Yeah.
Awesome.
So
Mike,
or just mikekilcoyne.com. Yeah.
awesome. Listen, thanks for being on board today. Great conversation, man.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.
I it's such an honor, so I appreciate it so much. Thanks, Tim.
You're always welcome. And this is the Profit Express. And be on the lookout for episodes like the one I just had with Mike Kilcoyne as they drop every Wednesday. You're following us on YouTube or Instagram at the Profit Express. If you like what you see, give a follow, give a like, subscribe. And until next time, continue to check out these episodes and messages like we talked about today, as this is what we all need to hear as we ready ourselves and prepare ourselves to win the battle for business. It's the Profit Express. Until next time.